Welcome to TAP. Welcome to tap into at least one place in this world where we remember our wholeness. And today we are in great company with Glenn Harrold, who's a hypnotherapist, author, and whose vibration, whose voice has truly been enjoyed by so many of us through many years. I can't even remember how many years. We've enjoyed it, we've relaxed into it, and it's many thousands of people. Actually, his hypnosis and meditation recordings has been sold more than 10 million times. It's incredible. And I bought 96 of them. So just for the record, 96 of them is mine. But there's a bunch of free for YouTube as well today. And let me just quote him from the introduction to the Solfeggio recordings, where he says this: sound and vibration is the fabric of the universe. Everything is created and given form out of vibrations of sound and light. In relationship with all living things, we are vibrating and resonating continuously, each a part of a living web of life. Welcome, Glenn Harrold.
Hello, Mannah. Lovely to meet you.
I thought this was a good way to introduce you. How do you feel?
Yeah, I love that. Were they? That was my words from one of the recordings, one of the Solfeggios.
Yeah, I read it.
Huh? Oh, okay. It's a
Yeah.
long time since I made those recordings, so it's nice to hear that back.
Okay, I was actually
Yeah.
gonna ask you first, is that your newest series?
The Solfeggio recordings are um, a set of 6 recordings that I made probably about 15 years ago with Ali Calderwood.
Okay.
So
No.
it's and it's one of those series that's really resonates with people. It's been very popular.
Yeah. Well, do you want to say something about just your philosophy behind that?
Yeah, well, we discovered the tones. Myself and Ali Calderwood, we were friends, and we were. He used to run amazing ceremonies, plant medicine ceremonies,
Mm.
and I journeyed with him a number of times in the UK when I lived there, and we got the idea to make a series of meditations based around the solfeggio tones. So these 6 tones were ancient tones that the Gregorian monks used to chant to invoke certain states. So with the first one, 396 hertz, that invokes states where you can release guilt and fear
Mm.
because it's based in the root chakra. And so these tones are very specific. So the Gregorian monks would chant these tones and they'd work on releasing these things, whatever tone they were chanting on. And so we got the idea to make a series of meditations based around the tones. And Ali made the music because he's a very gifted musician, and he created the music exactly on each one of the frequencies. And then between us, we scripted a meditation for each one. And so the combination of the frequency itself, Ali's music, and my meditation, my voice, kind of created this something a bit different. And we put them out there, and they've been really successful. People love them. And we even had the guy, Dr. Len Horowitz, who was instrumental in rediscovering the tones and popularizing them. He messaged us out the blue and said, I've listened to these and they're exactly on the same right frequencies. He said, I've heard others and they're not. And he used to buy the CDs off us at the time and at wholesale price and sell them to his customers. So that was a nice endorsement of them.
Yeah, nice endorsement. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow. Okay, great. So we might come back to that because I definitely have some questions for how something like sound vibration can change your
Mm.
relationship to shame and guilt. But first, I'd like to ask you how you became Glenn Harrold. Do you know what I mean? Because you're in such a
Yeah.
unique position. And I know
Yeah.
that there are many voices out there and podcasts, but hypnosis is different. Hypnosis and meditation is different because you hear it over and over. Plus, you've been in this game for 25 years. Not a lot, a lot of people can say that.
Mm.
So it's just so many people are putting these recordings on again and again and again.
Yeah.
How did that? How did that become? Yeah, how did that come to be?
So from how I started making the recordings,
Well, the question is, how did you become Glenn Harrold? In
I
the way.
kind, I kind of, I mean, I've always been Glenn Harrold, but the Glenn Harrold version now is very different to the one that, when I was 20. Because when I was young, I grew up in a very dysfunctional, violent household. And I used to run away from home when I was young, and I got in with a bad crowd. And I used to drink a lot and smoke a lot and take a lot of drugs and get into a lot of trouble. Because when you don't have a stable home life, especially with young men, they seek that family in a brotherhood, if you like. And the only brotherhood in my town was a gang of bad lads. And so I kind of fell in with this gang and got into a lot of trouble. And I was a very lost soul. I was living, my vibration was very low at that time. I can look at it now because I'm living a completely different life. Uh, with even if I say it myself, a high vibration. And so I know what it is, the contrast to be in the position I'm in now and the vibrational energy I was in back then. And, the drink and the drugs and the trouble that I was in was low, kept me in a low vibrational state. And so I was in this cycle of struggle, hardship, difficulty. I was always broke and relationships were fleeting. And there was something inside me that wanted to get out of that, but I just didn't know how to. And the one thing that kind of started to take my life in a different direction was that I learned to play the bass guitar. This was in the 70s. And so I joined a band. Somebody taught me to play the bass, and I joined a band, and we took off. We kind of went off in a different direction, and we had a little bit of success in the early 80s. And it didn't last for very long, but it took me in another direction. And years later, about another 10 years later, I started to play on the cabaret circuit. And it was while I was doing that, I saw a hypnotherapist. We shared the bill, sorry, with a stage hypnotist, not a hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And I was watching him backstage, and he was manipulating the audience using hypnosis. And I had this epiphany that I wanted to learn everything I could about it, because not for the entertainment side of things. I didn't want to make people dance around like chickens and do outrageous things, but I saw it as a tool for healing. And I thought I just knew that it could help me clear a lot of the trauma and the wounds and the addictions from my past. And so that was the turning point. And from there, I did a 2-year diploma with the British School of Clinical Hypnosis, and I absolutely loved it. I took to it like a duck to water, because as I was learning these techniques, just sitting in the classroom again, I felt really anxious sitting in a classroom, because my only experience of sitting in a classroom was at school. And that was a negative experience. I got expelled from school when I was 15. But then I used the hypnosis I was learning to get me over that fear, that anxiety that I had about being in the classroom. And that was the starting point. So everything I ever did after that, I was fixing myself and healing these traumas and wounds as I went along. And then once I qualified and then I started seeing clients, I was so passionate about the subject that it wasn't long before I was really busy. I was seeing lots of clients. After a couple of years, I had 20, 30 clients a week, and I loved it. It was hard work, because people rely on you to help them, to help them quit smoking or lose weight. But I loved it. But then after I'd seen about 1,000 clients, I got the idea, well, maybe I could make some recordings. And there was nobody in the UK making hypnosis recordings back then. So I made these recordings and I sold them into local stores, and suddenly they started to sell right from day one. And people were coming back into the store saying, this recording's helping me to sleep, or I've lost weight. So even though the recordings back then were fairly basic, they were helping people. And so suddenly this new vocation just opened up for me. and I've been on that path ever since. So it's kind of, that was the old Glenn Harrold, and slowly as I got less, I cleared a lot of trauma and wounds, and I started to think more positively, and I stopped smoking, quit drinking, got fit and healthy, and life just got better and better. My vibration changed. The people I attracted into my life were different to the old friends I had. And I just went on this amazing journey, to the one where I'm at now. And I feel so blessed.
Oh man, I have many questions for you. Okay, first I feel attached to the thing you said about you knew when you saw that stage hypnotherapist that
Yeah.
that there was something there that you
Yeah.
needed. What do you think that was, that attraction?
I think I've heard a theory that in our lifetime, we get six big opportunities in our life-changing opportunities that come along. And sometimes you take them, sometimes you don't. And I think for me, that was one of them, because I saw that guy and I was just transfixed. I was mesmerized. And it was something deep within me that was saying, you could do this. But I knew it wasn't the entertainment thing. I knew I wanted to use the power of hypnosis to heal.
To
That
hear?
was what really lit me up. And it was around that time as well. I started waking up spiritually at that time. The whole thing happened at the same time. As I was waking up spiritually, these opportunities were coming along. And I joined a little group in Tunbridge Wells in England called the Kent Healers. And I was about 30 then. And I used to go to this group, and it was the people there were probably 50, 60, 70. So I was the youngest one in the room by a long way. But there was something in it that I loved. I loved the hands-on healing thing. And my sixth sense was just telling me this path is something you've got to go down. Even though it was a very simple thing, I was just in a group of little old ladies and old men, and it was me there. But the interesting thing with it was that there was a guy that ran it called Peter. And at the end of the healing, he used to close with a meditation. And he used to say to me, Glenn, I want you to do the meditation. And this was before I became a hypnotherapist or anything like that. And I was really shy back then. I didn't have a lot of confidence. And so I used to think, oh, don't ask me. I don't want to do the meditation. But he insisted. He said, my guides are telling me you've got to use your voice in this way. And so I would do the meditation, and afterwards I'd feel good. I think, oh, I enjoyed that. That was actually great. And when I think back to that, his guides were telling him that I had to do the meditation because there was something in me that needed to do that. And it was another clear sign. And I think when I got on that path, when I got on the healing path and I changed direction and became, more compassionate, more loving, more, working on my vibration to raise my vibration. It was amazing how the universe opened up and gave me signposts. And that was one of them. And, God bless Peter. He passed away a few years after the group finished. But I often think of that, because he was an important part of my journey when I look back.
Yeah, yeah. What a gift to give to someone else,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah. Yeah.
that to you, to have seen that in you, and to hear that calling inside yourself.
Yeah.
Was place. And of course, I can't help to think about your birth chart and that you are a Gemini sun.
Yeah.
And you're 29 degrees of Gemini. So it's the
Ah.
last degree of the sign you're in. And Gemini is always about using your voice. It's
Hmm.
always about using your voice. But in that last degree, that's really a turning point. Like the soul has come has come a long way um, already. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that, but in this incredible way that you're using your voice now, that's
Yeah.
probably not something you would have expected, right?
Not at all. When I was young and when I was in the band, we did interviews, and I couldn't speak on the microphone. If we ever did an interview, I used to be paralyzed almost. My throat chakra was just shut down, and I used to let the other guys in the band speak because
Mm.
I didn't think I had anything worthy or worth saying.
I,
And I was so blocked.
a typical Gemini thing is to think that they're not smart. And it's
Mm,
really paradoxical because Geminis are the one who can become really intelligent because they take from so many different sources,
mm,
right? And are so curious, but they can have that shutdown because, yeah, probably like you said, something like bad school experiences, some
yeah.
kind of fear that I don't know anything
Yeah.
worth.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Mm.
I felt that back then. And even, if I look back or listen to interviews I did back in the band when I was like a teenager, I've got a clip on YouTube of when I did a TV interview and when I was 19. And, I don't say much, I don't speak very well and complete, but it was, you know, the polar opposite to how I am now. I enjoy speaking. I love being on camera now because I'm in my power, whereas then I wasn't. I was
Yeah.
shut down because of my childhood experiences and I was traumatized. And it shows, I always use myself as an example for others who are stuck in different ways or, caught up in traumas or addictions
Mm.
because I know what it is to get out of them and to break free and become like your authentic self. I feel like I'm my authentic self, whereas that was blocked back then. And I had all this negative conditioning. So I didn't have any self-belief. But with determination, with the inner work, you can break out of that and you can find your true voice.
See, that is exactly what I wanted to come back to from what you said before this. And this is the question that I've discussed with a girlfriend, and I need to ask you this. um, can hypnosis, meditation change everything? Like, is everything then just good? Can you really fix everything?
I think, we're all a work in progress, aren't we? My life now, I look at it now and I feel so blessed, so abundant. I've got my little family, I've got my older son who lives out here, who's a hypnotherapist as well, you
Oh.
know, and he's my best mate. I love him to bits. We're really close. And then I've got my two younger kids who are 9 and 7, and we're loving life. We live in a little bubble out here in Portugal, and it's
Mm.
just so beautiful. But, we still have people look at our life and they say, oh, you're so lucky you've got all this. And it is wonderful, but we still have, you still have things that come up,
Mm.
you know. But the thing is, when you're conscious and awake, you recognize it. And rather than just being a victim to these things, you do the inner work.
Mm.
And that's the difference between people who stay stuck in trauma and struggle and those who don't. Those who work on themselves and recognize when they need to clear stuff within them are the ones that progress through life. And I'll still be doing healing work on myself when I'm 90, when I'm 100,
Mm.
because I've never met anyone. I've met some really wise people, some amazing shaman and very amazingly spiritually gifted people, but I've never met anyone who is without their traumas and wounds and who doesn't need to work. So we're all a work in progress, but
Mm.
with discipline and dedication, you can really progress.
So is this your type of therapy? Because in therapy, you would think, yeah, you need to come back again and again and again
Yeah.
to have that self-inquiry.
Yeah.
But with hypnosis, I could also have the fantasy that then I, I don't need it anymore because now it's done. I'm
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
programmed. How does it work? What's the difference between therapy and hypnosis, I guess, is the
So
question.
if you've got a certain fear or a certain phobia or an addiction, certain kind of addiction, with hypnotherapy, you can clear those sometimes in one session. You can absolutely change people's lives very quickly. Even with my recordings, I get the most incredible feedback. It's mind blowing where people say that they were, suicidal, literally suicidal. And some, by chance, they listened to my recording and it totally took them off on another path.
Mm.
And, so you can have amazing transformations with hypnotherapy, um, with certain things. But I think as far as um, you know, healing yourself and not having anything left to heal. I think there's no end goal for that. We are on a journey. We've incarnated into this life to do this work,
Yeah.
to heal our shadow and to clear our karma, clear our family karma, and to find our true dharma, our soul's purpose, and to live the best life we can, so that when we do reach the end of this life and we move to the next place, we will move to a place that matches the vibrational energy we've got when we leave this planet. I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
And so I think, for everyone out there that's, struggling in any kind of way, just keep doing the inner work, keep
Mm.
healing. Look at why things come to you, look at why things happen in your life, and always look at what your role in it is. That's the art of being a good self-healer.
Mm.
Because if you're being triggered by something externally, there's always something in you that needs healing. And once you have that mindset, you're no longer a victim.
Mm. Yeah.
You progress and you move forward. And I think you can create this happy, positive, abundant life, even though the world is in chaos at the moment and it's crazy. And we've got these, very dark people running the world. We can still, live in our own little bubbles and be the new light in the world. If enough of us awaken truly, and that's happening collectively all over the world, then when that gets to a certain percentage, then the rest of humanity will awaken and we will live in this different vibrational energy.
Wow, that is, yeah, thank you for that. Because sometimes I need to hear that, right? I need someone to give me that hope. Is it possible? But
Yeah.
I want to tell you, I just want to share with you what my girlfriend said when we were talking about, is this the solution to everything? She said, it's probably not the solution to everything because more people would do hypnosis then. I
I
just
think
think about that.
it's one of those things that we all experience hypnotic trance states every single day. So when you wake up in the morning, between being fully asleep and fully awake, you're in the hypnopompic state. So it's a naturally occurring trance state. And that's a good time to, I get into good habits where I start my day with gratitude. So as soon as I start to wake up, I start to think about the things I'm grateful for, my family life, the love I've got in my life, and everything I'm grateful for, I think about at that moment because I'm setting myself up for the rest of the day. And so you can naturally hypnotize yourself each and every day. If I play a lot of sport, and before I play sport, if I'm playing competitively, I'll get into a little trance zone. And all I'll do is close my mind, close my eyes, take a few deep breaths, focus my mind, and think about a positive outcome when I do the sport. So you become your own hypnotist in a way if you adopt these techniques. And also, last thing at night before you go to sleep, that's the hypnagogic state. So it's a good time again to think about positive thoughts because they anchor themselves in your unconscious and you respond to them. So when I saw that guy on stage, I realized that this was an amazingly powerful tool and I wanted to learn everything I could about it.
Mm.
And I've used it ever since. And as I said, my oldest son is now a hypnotherapist because I used to hypnotize him when he was little to get him through exams and to help him feel confident at school and that kind of thing.
So it's not like you hypnotized him to become a hypnotherapist.
No, but that's been a byproduct.
It's been a byproduct. Good.
He loved it so much that he's naturally
Wow.
gravitated towards it. And he's doing really well as well. He's, full time now and he loves it.
So in a way, you're saying this is a tool, you've learned everything about it, and this is something that we can use for ourselves. And I also hear, or I think I hear that uh, something about we are always susceptible to a trance state. There are
Yeah, yeah,
period
yeah.
times of the day that there are more, you call it
Hy-
hypnagogic.
Hypnagogic and hypnopompic states.
Yes, those.
Yeah.
But in a way, because that's what I thought when we were talking about that as well. Like we're in a trance anyway, right? Our group mentality is in a way a sort of a trance.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing to be aware of in this day and age is that,
Yeah.
the powers that be in this world, they know how to use hypnotic language, hypnotic words, phrases to manipulate the masses. And it's kind of coming out, a lot of people are realizing what's going on and people are seeing through it all because, yeah, uh, I won't get too conspiratorial. People are realizing how hypnotized we've been and how dumbed down we've been because the powers that be in this world, they don't want enlightened, conscious, awakened souls because, if people are awake, they question things. But
Yeah.
when people are dumbed down and they're following the government advice and everything, they just blindly follow it. So they've actively dumbed people down, through the education system, through the putting fluoride in the tap water. That's the biggest one because fluoride calcifies the pineal gland. So when your pineal gland is calcified, your third eye is not open and you can't see. You're unconscious. So if people are drinking tap water, they're actually making themselves unconscious. So it's one of those things. And the government always say, oh, well, it's good for cavities. Fluoride's good for cavities. No, it's not. They're using it to dumb people down. They're actually poisoning the tap water. And for 30 years now, when I first woke up and I realized this, I put really good filters on my taps and so you've got to have a really good water filter on your tap. Otherwise you're very susceptible to their programming. And it's, yeah, quite sinister, but a lot of people are realizing it now.
And when you're talking about they, when you were saying some people also use the hypnotic language,
Yeah.
is that politicians who's official?
Some do, yes. Some politicians. There's something called Operation Mockingbird. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you type it into Google again, Google's not a reliable source, so you have to look on the alternative media. But Operation Mockingbird is where the news comes from one central place and it gets filtered out into all the news stations, and
Mm.
so that all the news stations are repeating certain words, certain key words and phrases that are designed to hypnotize people and to plant these suggestions in people's unconscious mind. Being a hypnotherapist, I see it crystal clear.
Yeah, that's what I
And
think.
it's
That
called
you,
Operation Mockingbird if anyone's interested on searching it. But look through the Brave browser or something like that. Don't look on Google because Google will point you in the wrong direction.
mm,
It's quite a it's quite a rabbit hole.
mm, okay.
Yeah.
Glenn Harrold, I have more themes I want to cover with you.
Yeah. I sense we want to go in a spiritual direction. That's the way it needs to go.
Yes, let's go there. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I want to ask you about astral travel.
Okay.
I can because I saw you have these meditations as well, astral travel, and it's something that I'm experimenting with at the moment. And
Yeah.
I just want to hear everything about it. So you can't say anything wrong. But maybe like how did you find it? How are you using it? I bet it's just one out of many. Uh,
Yeah. I'd always been fascinated
mm,
by the concept of astral traveling.
yeah.
And for a number of years, people had asked me, have I got a recording for it? And I'd always edged against it because it's quite a big thing if people come out of their bodies and they actually journey on the astral plane. And with a recording, you've got to be careful. If you've got a recording that's going out to millions of people, I was very mindful to make, when I actually did decide to make an astral travel recording, to make it super safe. That was my first priority, but also to make it effective and so people can journey with it. And so with that recording, I built in a lot of safety suggestions. And then at a certain point in the recording, I encouraged, I think it's the listener goes through a portal to the astral plane, and then they journey and they meet guides and angels, and they're always safe and protected. And it's a very quite a visual recording. And yeah, I've had some nice feedback. It's quite a new title. It's only been out about a year.
Oh,
Um,
that's a new
but
one.
it's something that, you know, as I understand it, the astral plane is the next plane above the earth plane, but it's the kind of layer between the earth plane and the astral plane is getting thinner. And it's, some people say it's why we're seeing a lot of chaos and a lot of darkness in the world at the moment, because the lower astral entities are able to come through the veil and infiltrate, you know, the people and situations in this world.
Mm.
But yeah, it's always a subject that's fascinated me. But the astral plane recording is something that's very high vibrational. And something you mentioned earlier, that with my recordings, I've always tried to infuse them with a lot of love and spirituality. You know, love is the most powerful force in the universe. So if I make an astral travel recording, there's a lot of love and a lot of heart in that, because that always keeps people safe. If they're journeying on the astral plane but they're feeling like they're protected and safe and in a bubble of love, that's and it's kind of the key ingredient to my recordings, that part of it. I always wanted that. The spiritual part of it is the thing that's the most important part for me. And even in more mainstream recordings that like stop smoking or lose weight, I've always infused them with that element, the kind of spiritual element, just a little bit in some of those recordings. So people, it opens them up in that way, in a spiritual way.
It's very loving.
Yeah, that's always the feeling. Because I know when you're laying there and listening, you want to feel that warmth. You want to
Yeah,
feel in a good place. And I've always tried to infuse the recordings with that.
yeah. No, successfully so, I'd say. Absolutely. It's so soothing and calming.
Mm,
Feels safe.
mm.
But so about the astral, so what is the purpose, would you say, of astral traveling or astral projection?
I think when you astral travel, you can, you know, there's no time, is there? You're free, you're out of your body, you're out of restrictions of the 3D world that we live in, and you can journey and
Mm.
you can visit maybe souls who have passed on. You can travel to different places and connect with different people, and to, yeah, kind of, you know, raise your vibrational energy if that's your purpose. I think the astral plane is similar to the earthly plane in that there's the dark and the light are both very strong there.
Mm.
As on this earth plane, the dark and the light are, are very strong on this planet. Dark forces are strong, but the light forces are strong. And I think we're in a spiritual war at the moment. I really do. And that's what we're seeing playing out in the physical world. But I think the astral plane is very similar.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the highest planes. I've journeyed in ayahuasca ceremonies to really, really high dimensions. It's the only time I've ever experienced it, but I've seen into dimensions way above the astral plane, and you know, where you're in this place where it's just pure love and everything is in harmony, everything is in balance. And I've experienced that in ayahuasca ceremonies. So the the astral is not dissimilar to the earthly plane, and it's just a place I think you feel you can go to expand your consciousness. I probably would say that's the main purpose.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, it's beautiful. I like hearing you talk about it. And it's interesting to hear about that you are also using ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Imagine an ayahuasca ceremony and a Glenn Harrold meditation in your ears. That could take
Well,
far out.
when I've been in ceremonies, I often feel really inspired afterwards.
Mm.
And one recording I made after a really powerful ayahuasca ceremony was a recording called Spiritual Healing. And so if you listen to that one, there's a lot of the ayahuasca in that recording because I was in the medicine when I actually made it. It was after the ceremony, but I was still in the medicine.
Okay.
And I really infused that one. I was just in a beautiful place at the time. And it takes you, and you go through the jungle, and you clear, you stand under a waterfall, and it clears your luminous energy field and of imprints and that kind of thing. I was just feeling the medicine when I made that.
Mm. Ah, beautiful. Okay, I wanted to ask you earlier, and I'm returning to it. That's the question about how vibration, how sound can clear out guilt. You were mentioning that in the beginning.
Mm,
And I guess this is what we're talking about. Like there's a higher vibration, there's a higher level in a way, and then there's the denser level. Yeah.
mm.
But yeah, can you explain how does that work? How how can a voice or vibration lift guilt off of you, if to use guilt as an example?
So we hold these things in our energy field, and through certain vibrational frequencies can match these uh, traumas in the body and activate them and help you to release them. And sound healing on its own is not something I've done myself, other than with other people when I've co-authored with other people who are into sound medicine. I've always used my voice and uh, the therapeutic techniques I've got to clear wounds and traumas. And if you've got a feeling of guilt, you're holding inside. As a therapist, I would ask you to explore that. Where's that come from? So when somebody's in the alpha or theta or delta state, I would ask them to explore that emotion. Where's that coming from? What's behind it? And more often than not, people will go back to a childhood event, something in their childhood that is triggering this feeling of guilt or whatever it is. And as soon as you get to that point, you start to draw it into their conscious awareness. The whole structure of the trauma starts to break down and people start to release it. And it's a great way to clear these things. So whatever you've got in your unconscious, you can clear that. If you have an awareness that there's something blocking you, holding you back, with a good hypnotherapist, you can really get to the heart of that and clear it. And yeah, it was a lot of the work I did early on in my career 30 years ago. And then, as I mentioned, I started to work with, in ayahuasca ceremonies where I cleared a lot more. I cleared a lot of family karma.
Mm.
There was a time when I was in a ceremony where I got this really strong message from my patriarchal ancestral downline. And they were saying to me, keep doing what you're doing because you're clearing the family karma. The fact I was the first one in my family to go into the healing trade, the healing business,
Mm.
um, I was getting this message from my grandfather, his father, and so on. They were saying, keep doing, you're clearing a family karma. And I really felt I was doing that. And when I came out of that ceremony, I researched it, and that's can happen in ayahuasca ceremonies. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't have any preconceived idea that was the case. So afterwards, I realized that was it, and it was quite amazing. If I look at my lineage, where I came from, and my son and my grandson now, how different they are to my relatives who got. We've broken the cycle. We've completely broken that cycle of, just trauma and um, distrust. There's a lot of
Mm.
distrust in the family. But now that's gone. All of that has gone. And we're living. So my downline now is experiencing a completely different, each one that comes in, it's a different incarnation. And I look at my little grandson, he's only 2 years of age, and he's just incarnated into this beautiful family, my son and his wife. and it's just surrounded by love. There's no trauma of you don't go through life without trauma, but very, very little, you know.
No, I think I know what you mean
Hmm.
because I also come from a traumatic background, and it does inspire me and touch you when you put it like that, and because it gives me hope. And
Yeah,
it's definitely what I'm intending to do. I also feel I am doing it, but just acknowledging that there's more to be done, right?
yeah,
Breaking that cycle, definitely.
yeah,
And
yeah,
definitely one of my great purposes of being
yeah,
here is because for me, and that maybe that's the same what you're saying, is that like I'm the first one in my generation to even have the opportunity to work on myself, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
If it's all about survival, then, it's all about survival. It's all about just making it, right? Another day.
yeah.
So I think that that might be the case for many people now, that there is an inclination here where it's not that there's still the struggle. You still have to survive, but
Yeah.
then we have free stuff like your stuff on YouTube. Anyone can come across this and change their lives.
That's the beauty of this day and age. When I started out, I started to awaken spiritually. I went to the library to get books on spirituality. I had to go to a local library. Now there's so many teachers. There's so many opportunities. Yeah, I've got dozens of free recordings on YouTube, and it's nice. It's a lovely way to to sell. I really enjoy that because I put my recordings on YouTube. And if people like them, then they download the app. It's a soft sell, and I really enjoy it. I've never liked the hard sell. Meditation's become a massive business now, and the biggest apps like Calm and Headspace, they're like billion-dollar apps. It's so big, but they're corporate. They've become corporate and they've got shareholders and that kind of thing. And it's a shame it's gone that way, but it always does in this world. It's capitalism, and that's the way it works. But um,
I'm glad
yeah,
to hear that opinion in you, actually, because I've been wondering about that. I've been wondering, why is he so generous?
what
Because,
my recordings.
yeah, it's very generous.
Yeah. I like the true abundance. True abundance is about giving and receiving. And it's something that if you learn the true art of abundance and the law of attraction, you understand that giving is equally important as receiving, because then there's this natural flow. I know I've got some close relatives who are incredibly wealthy, like 10 million plus, but they live a life like they're paupers, like they're broke, and they've got in poor health. There's no real abundance. They've got all this money, properties, but they're so stuck because they never learnt the true art of abundance.
Mhm.
So you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't understand, the ebb and the flow of abundance, and to give and receive, and to be open-hearted and to be compassionate, then you'll never enjoy it. It's that simple.
I'm so glad you bring it up, because this is actually my last question to you before we talk a little bit astrology. Uh,
Yeah.
that's entirely about abundance and what your relationship to money if I can ask this directly.
Yeah. Well, my relationship used to be quite negative. It was part of my whole upbringing, very negative upbringing. And I struggled all through my teens and my 20s. I was always broke. I always drove cars that were forever breaking down. I lived in rough areas. I was driving a mini cab in my 20s, in the middle of all through the night, to try and hustling my way through life. But once I woke up and I started to understand the law of attraction and true abundance, I I loved that concept. I just loved, and I used to meditate every single day on being abundant and visualizing. I was a young man then, so first thing I wanted was material possessions. I wanted to drive an Aston Martin. I wanted to have a villa in Florida. I wanted a million pound house in England. And I used to meditate. I was living in a really rundown area of South London in a tower block, but I used to visualize having the car, driving it. and having all these material things. And and I projected it out there. And every single day I do this religiously, even though my actual circumstances were really poor. I imagined I was living this abundant life. And I've told this story a few times. It was about 10 years later, life had changed so much that I was driving up to Birmingham to buy an Aston Martin for cash. And I bought this car for cash and I drove this beautiful, like James Bond car. You know, it was the ultimate for a young man. Drove this car home and I just remember thinking, wow, this, it's not new age woo woo. This, you tap into something really powerful that's there. When you believe you're abundant, even if you're not abundant, your bank statements are telling you you're broke, you can change your life. If you put the key is to be very disciplined. If you wanted to go to the gym and build a fit, healthy body, you'd have to do the work. And it's the same with that kind of work, the abundance work. You've got to do the work. You've got to believe it and meditate on it. And I did that. And I ended up with the Aston Martin, the villa in Florida, and the big house.
Did you?
And
All of
it
that.
was, and people say, how did you do it? How did you? I said, I used to meditate on it. I used to say that in bank meetings sometimes. They say, how did you didn't have anything? How did you? I used to say to the bank manager, I meditated on it. And they used to think, oh, we've got a right one here. But that was the truth of it.
I
I
need
know
to.
without that, it wouldn't have happened.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I really need to hear this because there's so much rationality out there.
Yeah.
I need to hear that miracles are possible. That's how I interpret it. I know it's like it's a technically maybe not a miracle because you did something to make it happen, right?
Yeah. One thing I'd say, one important thing I've missed on that is that when I started on the abundance journey, I knew that I had a lot of failure programming and a lot of sabotage patterns that were going to block me. And that was happening early on. I'd have a little success, then I'd sabotage it. So I recognized there was something in me that needed clearing. And so I did a lot of work on that,
Mhm.
clearing any blocks, any sabotage patterns. That's a really key element of this kind of work. Because if you don't do that, you might make money, but then you'll lose it. So I did a lot of work on that. I mean, in one session, I remember in particular, I'd I was being hypnotized, and the person took me back to when I had this a problem, a trauma, and I went back to being about 5 years of age, and I had this memory come up from my unconscious where my mother and father were standing in front of each other, screaming at each other. My dad ripped up some money and threw it at her. And so I was a little kid looking at this, and I was learning in that moment that money causes these horrible rows and traumas. And but in that session, it came into my conscious awareness for the first time in 30 years. And I was able to process it as an adult and release it. And after I did a number of those things, I found that I didn't have those blocks. Those The fear of making money had gone. And there, it was open, it was wide open. And then my projections became stronger and it all worked. So that kind of inner work is absolutely crucial, along with your goal setting and your, affirmations and your projections.
No, that makes a lot of sense because once it's in your explicit memory, then
Yeah.
that's when we can do something about it.
Mm. In
Um,
your awareness, that's
yeah,
the key. Because a lot of the time we have these sabotage patterns in our unconscious mind
yeah,
and we're not aware of them. Because
mm,
as a kid, you go through these traumas and they're so painful that you often compartmentalize them and you dissociate from them.
mm,
But through hypnotherapy, you can access them again and process them as an adult and release them.
mhm.
And it's powerful. It's really powerful.
I really need us to hear this. It is possible, and but do you recognize what I'm saying? That it's easy to hear someone just saying, well, that's just life. Sometimes you win and you lose, and it just goes up and down. But the way that you explained it to us is, well, there was a programming in me, and
Mm,
that's why I kept losing the money. But
mm,
you can make that into some kind of rationality, a rational
mm,
voice saying,
mm.
just yes, it's just how it is to be an adult, and right? Do you understand that? So it can
Yeah.
be. difficult to keep in that faith. No, it's actually possible to get to where I want to go.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, when you did this, did you keep the faith or did you just keep doing it?
I had a lot of the one thing I inherited was a lot of drive. In my family, there's a strong drive. My father was a businessman, my grandfather was a businessman as well, and I inherited that. But when I was young, I used it in the wrong way.
Ah,
But it was when I woke up and I became conscious or started to become conscious, I used that drive to transform my life. I was so sick of being broke, sick of struggling, sick of relationships not working out. I got so hungry for change and transformation. And so for me, spending an hour each day in a hypnotic trance state, programming my mind in a positive way was something I loved. I love doing it. In the same way that, young guys like building really fit, healthy bodies. You see these guys now, don't you? It's such a popular thing. And girls that build really super fit, healthy bodies because they're so determined to look good. That's their motivation. So you've kind of got to get the fire in your belly. You've really got to get hungry for change and transformation. And for me, I had that because my life had been so, excuse my friends, but shit up until that time. I just became so determined to change it. And I was running on this fire. And
mhm.
even though early on, you think, well, is this going to work? I don't know. But I just did have the deep down, I had some kind of faith that made me think, just keep doing it. Even if you're not, even if it doesn't, you're relaxing for an hour.
Yeah.
But something in me knew that I was changing my life from the inside out. I felt that strongly.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I know I recognize it totally. The desire to transform because you know that you hope there's a better life. Sometimes you may know it, sometimes it's just a hope, but you're doing the work to get there.
Yeah, and have the faith. Fake it until you make it. That's always it's a great line, but it's true in hypnosis. It's really true. Sometimes you've got to keep visualizing it and keep imagining it, and it will happen. It will follow.
Mm. And I just want to speak a little bit with you about your astrology.
Okay.
So the biggest thing in the easiest thing to see in your chart is your great commitment to the collective,
Hmm.
to something larger than yourself. It's
Hmm.
like very evident in your chart.
Okay.
Also, you can call it cross pollination, like your multiple sources of inspiration. That's also a big one.
Mm.
And um, and then what I've been hearing as we speak is also your Virgo ascendant, because
Ah.
there is something to be done, right? I can fix this, and it makes sense that in the beginning our ascendant could be something not yet developed, and it can be a heavy load, and we can critique ourselves a lot in that archetype. But then when you mature into it, it becomes, there's something that I can do about this, right? So using that talent, using those competencies to serve the collective and to do it in a way where you stay curious and open to many sources of information, that
Ah,
is
that's interesting.
central to your chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting because I told you at the beginning before we came on, I had a reading about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a South African lady who was a friend of a friend. She was an astrologer and she read my chart. And this was before I became a hypnotherapist, before I started making recordings. She said, similar to what you've said there, I always remember she said that you're here to have, and her words were, a profound effect on humanity the world over
Yes.
in a positive way, like serving the collective, like you've just said.
Mhm.
And at the time, I remember thinking, I had actually, no, I just started to become a hypnotherapist. I was just about seeing clients. And she said, it's through your work, you're going to have this big impact all over the world and, and reach a lot of people. And I remember thinking, well, I'm seeing local clients, I'm seeing 20 or 30 clients a week. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I thought, no, that sounds a bit, not resonating. It was years later when I started selling millions of recordings. I looked back and I remembered her words and I thought, oh my God, she was telling me how my chart is mapped out for this amazing opportunity where I do connect with millions of people and help them. And it goes back to that thing I said at the beginning, that these, you have 6 or so major opportunities that come along in your life. And me seeing that hypnotherapist that day and going on that hypnotherapy course and then making recordings, these were all the opportunities. And I'm just feel so grateful that took those opportunities when they came along. That was the key. But it was all in the stars. It was all charted out,
It's
which is
interesting, right?
wonderful.
Yeah. So you have a good relationship to astrology. I can.
Yeah, I've always loved it. If anyone, like when you said, I'll read your chart, I thought lovely. I've always liked knowing that because it's an amazing thing, isn't it? But I don't know a lot about it, to be honest, but I just listen to people who know a lot more like yourself, and I find it fascinating.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, I like it. I like the point that astrology was correct about you.
Yeah,
Even when we don't know and even when we don't understand, how should I get there? I can't. It's too much, right? And
yeah.
then life takes you there.
That's just the mind, though, isn't it? It's often the mind that blocks us. The mind can limit us at times. But, that's another thing I love about the unconscious mind, because when you go into that, there's no limitation.
Mm,
Anything is possible. You're tapping into your ultimate creativity and your higher consciousness. And there are no limitations in that. The mind, the conscious mind is the thing that can limit us.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about, that we are all vibrating, resonating continuously, each part of a living web, the things that you say. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the key. And the more that we raise our vibrational energy,
Mm,
the more the external world changes, because we match with, situations, things, and people of a similar vibration. So when you raise your vibrational energy, you tend to meet more positive people. You tend to find more opportunities come along. And that's the real secret. So that the inner work is everything, because it just takes you on an amazing journey.
I agree to that. Agree to that. Thank you so much, Glenn Harrold, for this interview and for everything that you are putting out there. And something has a little price to it, but you also have a lot that you just give out. And,
Yeah.
and so thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome, Mannah. It's lovely to meet you. And thank you for doing my chart.
You're welcome. I'll link people to you so they can find more and have a lovely day where you are.